Bunny Girl Senpai is one of the best romance animes to ever come out, but one problem is the adolescence syndrome, as sometimes it can be very confusing, and I'm going to try my best to explain it all. But one thing that I do want to mention is that in this anime, they try to break it down in some scientific form rather than saying that it's flat out magic. Now, first off, this is not science. It's a bunch of pseudoscience and it's made up. Obviously, there's no way that emotions will lead up to a quantum mechanic entanglement, whatever, you know? So when you hear the word quantum mechanics, it's just their version of trying to explain what's going on. And this is mainly explained through Futaba, because, I mean, she's a genius. And the first one up is Mai Sakurajima, where no one can see her. She's practically invisible except for Sakata. Now, my belief as to why Sakata is the only person to ever see her is because he doesn't have a phone. He has no reason to care who Mai is. I mean, yeah, she's a famous model. She's promoted all over the internet, but again, he doesn't have a phone. We'll get to that later. But the reason why she ends up becoming invisible is because she feels no self-worth. People only see her as Mai, the model, not Mai as a person. This kind of feeds into that adolescent syndrome, but what really sets it off is her relationship with her mother, as her mom just tries to gain profit off of her own daughter. And one of the things that really set this completely off the rails is when Mai's mom tried to insist doing a photo shoot in a swimsuit, which was not good for Mai whatsoever. She didn't want to do that. And essentially, this is what really sparked it off. All these emotions just led her to become invisible. And of course, this is where we get that infamous scene where Maya is in a bunny suit. This adolescent syndrome is completely resolved with another famous scene from Sakata where he confesses to Maya in front of everybody in the school. And this was more of a direct approach on how to resolve rather than trying to subtly introduce Mai back into society. He flat out just makes everyone acknowledge who Mai is, and this makes her appear in front of everyone. And it looks like a magic trick. I mean, dude, she just became uninvisible. And again, this show tries to explain this mysterious phenomenon as some quantum mechanic entanglement, you know, spiel. And this is famously mirrored to replicate the Schrodinger's cat theorem, where, you know, a cat isn't inside a box, but we don't know that yet if the box isn't open. But if it is, then boom, there's a cat. Yeah, it's just observations and mechanics and quantum, whatever. And secondly is Kaede. Kaede is the little sister of Sakata, our main character, and she ends up suffering through cyberbullying and death threats, and this makes her fear a lot of people and a whole setting, which is the school. And this obviously sets off her adolescent syndrome, where it kind of works in two ways. One way, she ends up developing another personality where she acts more kid-like, very childlike. She talks in third person. She doesn't act her age and is very clingy to Sakata, her older brother. And the other is the well-known one where she develops mysterious cuts and bruises on her body. And this is a very punishing adolescent syndrome because no one thus far in this series has suffered this much. Now, Kaede's adolescent syndrome ends up causing a whole family conflict where her mom ends up developing a mental illness because her mom just doesn't know what's going on and doesn't know how to help. And this ends up splitting the family apart, not through mom and daughter and son and father and son, but through kids and parents alone. Sakata's dad ends up living only with Sakata's mom, and Sakata and Kaede live together. This is, of course, to ease any tension, because if Sakata's mom were to see Kaede suffer once again, her mental illness would just revert back. Now, one interesting detail about this Kaede adolescent syndrome arc is that it affects Sakata in a way where he has this unique characteristic where he doesn't have a phone. And the reason for that is that he threw it into the ocean, because anything internet related will heavily affect Kaede, as she suffered through cyberbullying. Now, although this did help a little bit, it really didn't help all that much, because Kaede was the one that had to get over her fear of people. And eventually she does, but this is where another famous scene comes to play, where Kaede doesn't remember where the pandas or who the pandas or why the pandas even matter. And this shatters Sakata's heart, because everything that he's done thus far was revolving around the kid like Kaede. And essentially, in a way, she's dead. She no longer exists. She will never come back. And Kaede doesn't remember anything that happened within this adolescent syndrome. The only thing that she ever does remember is what happened prior, before she developed another personality. And to make matters worse is that this scene is 10 times more depressing when Sakata is the only one really mourning the fact that this other sister that he had died. Now, the other character to develop an adolescent syndrome is Futaba, everyone's second or first favorite character of all Bunny Girl Senpai, and I totally see why. But again, Mai Sakurajima is the best one in my opinion. Now, Futaba's adolescent syndrome stemmed from hating her own body. She did not like the fact that her body developed a lot faster compared to those people in her school. And a side effect from this development was attention by the males in her class and jealousy from the females of her class. This would soon cause her to hate her own body. But one interesting thing about this entire scenario is that she ends up encouraging it in a way. She uploads these images of her body onto the internet for people to see. Now, does she enjoy this? No, she does not like her own body, as I already stated, but she does like the self-hate and self-disgust that she gets from posting those images. It's kind of like a guilty pleasure. She likes the fact that she can hate herself for a reason. And I just want to make that clear. She does not like uploading those images of herself, but she likes, again, the self-hate that stems from it. But what is this adolescent syndrome? What was this mysterious phenomenon that happened? Well, this essentially split Futaba into two people. One where she is more reserved or exactly the same as we were introduced to at the beginning of the series, and another one where she is more outgoing, more flirty, and more charismatic. And this ends up resolving in a way where the outgoing Futaba realizes that she does not have to act a certain way for people to accept her, while the other Futaba also accepts the fact that, again, she doesn't have to change. She can be herself and everyone will still accept her for her rather than the body that she has. Now, as I said before, a lot of these adolescent syndrome is explained through quantum entanglement, quantum mechanics, and all that fancy stuff. And for Futaba, this had to do with quantum teleportation and quantum mechanics yet again. I don't know where the teleportation takes place. It probably has to do with theories of how one person can be here and there at the same time. I don't know. It doesn't make sense in my head. I'm not good with physics or quantum anything, so you can look that up yourself. And now we reach the losing heroine territory where we are introduced with Tomoe. Now, she is introduced a little bit earlier, but we don't get her adolescent syndrome until now. And hers is a time loop, and this stems from not being able to fit in. And she is severely hyper-focused in trying to do so. She wants to be with the crowd. She fears that if she doesn't fit in, she's not gonna be cared for at all. One person that is not affected by this time loop is, of course, Sakata, our main character. Now, I have a feeling the reason why he's not affected in this time loop is because Tomoe has feelings for Sakata. Again, this is a time loop. They relive the same exact day for many days. And I won't get too detailed what happens in these specific days within the time loop, but I will mention that this has to do with another quantum mechanic theorem as explanation because, you know, adolescent syndrome isn't magic, it's quantum mechanics. And it is referred to Laplace's demon. It has to do with knowledge, the all-knowing knowledge and the person trying to seek knowledge. I don't know how that intertwines with this entire time loop in adolescent syndrome. It doesn't make sense yet again, but this is all pseudoscience. It's just cool how they're trying to incorporate science into this mysterious mechanics. But the way this adolescent syndrome comes to an end is when Tomoe ends up asking Sakata out, where evidently Sakata denies because he has the best girlfriend known to man, Sai. Mai. How did I butcher that? The time loop breaks once Tomoe's feelings are broken, but she learns to accept that she does not have to try so hard to fit in to be part of a group. And eventually she does learn that. She ends up having her own friends. She ends up being friends with a idol star. Well, not very famous one, but nonetheless an idol. Sakata's little sister, eventually, because they all work at the same place. Next one up is Nodoka. She is the little sister, half sister of Mai Sakurajima. Now, her adolescent syndrome is swapping bodies with her older sister Mai. Now, this has to do with jealousy and the comparison from her parents to Mai. As we all know, Mai is a very successful model and Nodoka essentially has nothing. She's a struggling rising star, and Nodoka's mom is pointing that out and eventually causes so much stress where the adolescent syndrome is manifested. And again, I won't go through the details of what went down when Nodoka was in Mai's body, but to give a quick summary, she ends up finding out how Mai lives, and she also figures out how thirsty of a man Sakata can be. But this is again resolved because Nodoka and Mai have a talk, and what Mai says is essentially she doesn't have to be anyone. She just has to be a better version of herself and not have to worry about what other people have to say. And that's where they get their bodies back. Nodoka is in Nodoka's body and Mai is in Mai's. Now again, they don't have an unhealthy relationship. In fact, they are really close, but the one that really caused this again was Nodoka's mother. Now here is where we start getting to the movies, because this character isn't all that much introduced or looked into deeply until the movie, of course. And this is Rascal Does Not Dream of Dreaming Girl, where it gets very confusing with the time travel, different timelines, alternate realities, all that mumbo jumbo. But it doesn't get confusing once you know how the adolescent syndrome works, because this person is Shoko. Now, Shoko has a heart disease, and this heart disease ends up making her stressed and not know how much time she has to live. And essentially what caused this adolescent syndrome is when she was at school, she was given a homework assignment or a school assignment of who she wants to be in the future. And of course, having this heart disease, she doesn't know how much time she has left to live. And this ends up manifesting this adolescent syndrome where she ends up seeing herself as a high schooler. And this teenager version of Shoko ends up causing this timeline anomaly where the one that was destined to die is the heart that is now in Shoko. If that doesn't make sense, I'll explain it like this. The original timeline, which I know that sounds scary, but I'll make a video explaining the whole movies here in the next few days. But Shoko ends up becoming an adult or a teenager because the surgery done to her to get rid of her heart disease was Sakuta's. And we see that because Sakuta in the beginning of the movie ends up getting killed by a car. But then that ends up doing some timeline anomaly thingy where Sakuta ends up saving himself and all this other stuff. I might be wrong. I have to rewatch the movie to give you the exact details. So we'll just leave it at that. But through another timeline or an alternate reality, Mai is the one to die this time, and instead of Sakuta's heart, it's Mai's heart and Shoko's. But Shoko realizes that she doesn't want any of this sacrifice that's being done to her to keep her alive. So what she ends up doing is accepting the fact that she does not have to stress so much of what's going to happen in the future. And while completing the homework, she ends up resolving this adolescent syndrome. But what doesn't make sense for a lot of people, and myself at the beginning as well, is that how is she alive? How does Shoko live if Sakuta or Mai were destined to die for her to keep living? Well, this ends up causing an entirely new different reality where that doesn't need to be a requirement. But how does she get the heart? Why does she get to live? Well, if you watch the movie, there was a specific scene where Mai was given a role in a movie where it was a horror movie at the beginning. She ends up taking it. But due to this new alternate reality, instead of a horror movie, it was a sad drama movie where the plot was a girl with a heart disease trying to fight for her life to keep on living, essentially Shoko. And this movie ends up inspiring anyone who watches it to become a donor, and that's what ends up happening to Shoko. She just lucks out and gets a new heart. Now we don't know who this person is, it's not specified, and I know this makes no sense, but again, I will do my best to make the movie make sense in another video. Oh, and if there are any questions regarding the scars that appear on Sakuta's chest, that is the transplant that is taking place. Now, this does happen in season 1, and it was presumably thought that it happened because of her little sister Kaide, but it was really just the timeline that he was in where Shoko ends up getting that heart transplant through Sakuta. Now, we're not just done with the movie territory yet, as we still have to cover Rascal Does Not Dream of Knapsack Kid. Now, this mainly revolves around Sakuta and his adolescent syndrome. Sakuta suffers almost the same exact adolescent syndrome that Mai did. He ends up turning invisible in front of everyone. No one sees him, no one hears him, and no one knows who he is. And this adolescent syndrome stems from his relationship with his mother. Now, there are some things that did happen, as I mentioned, in Kaide's situation, where they split. They don't have a good relationship because Sakuta tried his best to keep Kaide safe because he's the only one aware that adolescent syndrome exists. No one does, and everyone just kind of sees him as a little nutcase. But again, the mental illness just kind of proved that for Sakuta, his mom is not a reliable parent. And this does cause some issues, and the more he distanced himself from his mother, the more this adolescent syndrome intensifies. And it didn't start off with invisibility at first. It actually started off with a scar by his belly. That is a symbolic meaning, and we'll get to that now. And the reason why his scar appears on his belly and why he turns up invisible is that if you do not have a mother, you cease to exist. That's the best way that I can summarize it. You don't have a mom, you're just not alive, because I mean, how else are you supposed to be born? The umbilical cord represents that scar. The disappearance of him represents him not existing. So the more he distances himself from his mother, the more he is ceased to exist. Now, of course, this is all later resolved within the movie. He ends up reconciling with his mom and they have a better relationship, and they all end up having dinner at some point with Mai, and happy times. And sticking with the themes of alternate timelines or alternate universes, we have Izuki, where she ends up developing her adolescent syndrome through a savior complex, or just straight up guilt, because she was not able to save Sakuta when he was going through the whole scenario with Kaede and her adolescent syndrome. She believed, along with her classmates, that adolescent syndrome was just a hoax and it didn't exist. So they saw Sakuta as a nutcase, but she ends up finding out that it was a real thing. And this is where the alternate timeline slash universes is introduced. Now, before continuing on, I want to make things clear and a little bit easier to understand. Now, essentially, there are two Ikumis, the one with the glasses and the ones without. Now, the one with the glasses is from the new timeline for all the things that we see in season 2. The one with no glasses is from the original timeline where Sakuta was again supposed to die. Now, what happened was that the no glasses swapped places with the ones with the glasses, and the ones with no glasses ends up developing the savior complex that I mentioned earlier, and she uses hashtag dreaming to save anybody that is going to be in trouble. And what hashtag dreaming is that through dreams people are able to kind of tell what happens in the future. She uses that to her advantage, and the Ikumi with the glasses ends up seeing that this Ikumi did not live a successful life. She tried to go to university but failed many times. She ends up taking a job route. And now, of course, this is all resolved when she and Sakuta have a conversation saying that she does not have to hold on to this severe guilt that she has been for so long. Next is our rising star, Uzuki. Now, she is a complete airhead, but yet a very charismatic and good character at heart. She ends up developing a adolescent syndrome where she can read the room. Now, before she could read the room, she again was a airhead. That is a very important characteristic because she did not fit in all that well. She is overly positive, and not a lot of people really like that as a characteristic, especially when you're down in the dumps. Some people might find that annoying. It ends up causing a lot of problems and drama. But this is a weird adolescent syndrome because it wasn't a mysterious one that popped out of nowhere. This was actually brought through Kirishima, which we'll get to that later. But she ends up reading the room. She's essentially able to tell what people are feeling, talking about her, and all sorts of stuff. Now, one common misconception is that this adolescent syndrome made her lose her voice, which is just not true. The reason why she ends up losing her voice is through the intense feelings, unmotivation that she felt through reading the room. She felt like this idol group that she's been working with for so long isn't going anywhere. And this ends up causing severe doubt where she's not gonna make it. But after talking to Sakuta again, because he's just the GOAT, that is later resolved. She ends up coming back to her regular self, a little bit more of an airhead, but still able to kind of read people a little bit more and in a way where it's not affecting anybody negatively. Now, if you're still watching, I greatly appreciate it. And don't worry, we are almost done because we are to our second to last character, and that is Sarah Himeji. Now, she has a special ability called clairvoyance, where she's able to read people's mind as well as seeing through people's perspectives. She can see what other people see, and this is her adolescent syndrome, and it was developed by a heartbreak by her childhood friend. She asked her out, he said no, boom, heartbreak, clairvoyance. Essentially, that's just a rough summary. And of course, she causes a little bit of problems, and she was a very stressful character, especially for me, because she was trying to wedge herself between Mai and Sakuta. And don't get me wrong, she did. She thought she had a chance, but my gosh, let me tell you, Mai stood on business and pretty much shooed her way her adolescent syndrome. That adolescent syndrome got scared away because Sarah realized that she had zero chance to be with Sakuta because Mai exists. They have the best relationship. I don't know how to tell you. You have to watch that episode because Mai listed every single good thing about their relationship, and throughout the entire time Sakuta was viewing this through Sarah's perspective. Mai is just the GOAT, and again, this is what scares her adolescent syndrome away. She had no chance to be with Sakuta, and it's gone. Lastly is Kirishima, and she is a straight up anomaly, as mentioned by Shoko at the end of the movie Rascal Does Not Dream of Knapsack Kid, where Shoko ends up telling Sakuta that Kirishima just doesn't exist. Neither does her music. So that already sets up a red flag on how strange this person is. Now, another thing, in the making of this video, I am only on episode 11 because episode 11 is the most concurrent one. And I have not read any of the light novels, so I don't know how this adolescent syndrome is going to be resolved. I just know her true identity and how it started. Now, again, Kirishima is not who she says to be. Kirishima is a fake name, a fake identity, because her real name is Nene Iwamizawa. Now, Nene doesn't exist anymore. She ends up suffering through the same adolescent syndrome, similar to what Mai suffered from. No one sees her, and she is completely invisible. She is pretty much erased from reality at this point. Now, the reason why Nene's adolescent syndrome came to be had to do with the fact that she was a very gorgeous woman. I mean, everyone in her university, her friends thought that she was beautiful, and she ends up winning a vote or a poll on who is the prettiest person in the campus. But these compliments and attention will soon turn to mockery once Mai comes back to the showbiz, as all the attention from Nene went to Mai. And due to the stress and jealousy of all this happening, she ends up disappearing. She does not feel like she doesn't exist anymore. But why does she use the name Kirishima? Well, there is one important thing, and that is the fact that Nene doesn't exist. Now, again, this is where I end the video because I have yet to figure out how Kirishima's adolescent syndrome is resolved. But if you made it this far, I greatly appreciate if you drop a like and subscribe, because that does help me out a lot. Again, I appreciate y'all so much. Thank you, and I will see y'all next time.